Okay, 5.3 is graphing quadratic inequalities. So essentially it's like graphing the absolute value inequalities. If it's a greater than, you shade above. If it's a less than, you shade below. And then greater than or less than or equal to, solid line. And then greater than or less than is a dashed line. And so you can always use the 0-0 test like we did for lines, but it's a lot more straightforward with the quadratic because you either shade above or you shade below. So greater than above, less than below. So for number 1, what form is number 1 in? In vertex form. So my vertex is at what point? -2, 5. So I'm going to put a point at -2, go up 5. Then I have a slope of -1, so I can go down 1 over 1 on each side. And it'll be a dashed line. My axis of symmetry is going to be x equals -2. It opens down, so I have a maximum. And since it is a less than, that means I'm going to shade below. So it gets shaded on the inside.
Just in like the little parabola thing? Could you say that less than you shade the inside and greater than you shade the
Well, it wouldn't be the case like if I had a parabola that faced up, then shading below would mean shading the outside. So just think about it as above and below. Okay, number 2 is in what form? Standard. So that means to find my vertex and axis of symmetry, I need to do x equals -b over 2a. And so that would be -4 over 2 times -1, which is 4 over -2, which reduces to -2. So my axis of symmetry is x equals -2. How do I find my vertex from my axis of symmetry? Yeah, I'm going to plug this into the original. So -2 squared minus 4 times -2 plus 4. And I'm going to solve. So I leave this negative out in front. When I square the -2, it becomes a +4. But then with the negative in front of it, it's now a -4. Plus 8 plus 4. Which gives me 12 minus 4, which is 8. So I have a vertex at -2, 8. Then I have a slope of -1, so I go down 1 over 1 on each side. It is a dashed line. Then it is a greater than, so that means that I shade above. So I'm going to shade on the outside of this one. Opens down, and it has a maximum. Okay, on the next page, that's your homework. So you'll have 2 problems of homework for this section. So scratch out the next page where it says notes and put homework. That'll be homework for 5.3. And so 5.4, it's writing quadratic equations, so it's going to give you pieces of information about the graph, and it's wanting you to write the equation from that. So if we look at number 1, it says, write a quadratic equation for the parabola with a vertex of 1, -2, and it goes through the point 3, 2. And it wants you to write it in vertex and standard form. So my suggestion is to write it in vertex first, because when they give you a vertex, it's easy to plug that in. And so it gives me the vertex, which is HK, and then we're going to use the point 32 as an X and a Y. So the first step is I'm just going to write what vertex form is, which is Y equals A X minus H squared plus K. So this is vertex form, and now I can plug in everything that I know. So I'm going to plug in numbers like 1, negative 2 for H and K, and then I'm going to plug in numbers 3, 2 for X and Y. So that's going to take care of 4 of the variables, and then I'm only left with A to solve for. So that's essentially what you're trying to do, is solve for your A. So 2, which is my Y, equals A. My X is 3 minus H, so minus 1 squared minus 2. So does everyone see how I got those numbers? I just plugged in for H, K, X, and Y. Now I'm going to solve it out. So 2 equals 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 squared is what? So 4A minus 2. Add 2 to each side. So 4A equals 4. So A equals 1. So once you have this piece of information, you want to go back and plug it into the original, and you want to write the completed formula or equation into vertex form. So that would be Y equals A, which is just 1. So you can either put a 1 in front or you don't have to. X minus 1 squared minus 2. And I'm going to erase the 1 because I don't like having a 1 out in front. So Y equals X minus 1 squared minus 2. That is vertex form. It says also write it in standard form. So how could I get it in standard form from vertex? Yeah, I want to just FOIL it out, so I want to multiply it out and then solve. So I'm going to FOIL out the X minus 1, which becomes X squared minus 2X plus 1. And I'm going to add the minus 2 at the end. So standard form would be Y equals X squared minus 2X minus 1. Okay, so you have a vertex at 4, negative 5, and then a point at 2, negative 1. So I plugged in to vertex form for X, Y, H, and K. And then you can see I solved for my A value. My A value was 1. So then I take that A value and I just plug it into vertex form. But you're only keeping the numbers for H and K. You want to keep the variables X and Y. You don't want to use the X and Y. You only use the X and Y one time, so the 2, negative 1. You only use that once to solve for your A. Once you have your A, you don't need to use it anymore. So you want your vertex form to be Y equals A, X minus H plus K. Then I FOILed that out to get standard form. Standard form is Y equals X squared minus 8X plus 11. So it says write a quadratic equation for a parabola with x-intercepts at negative 1, 0, 4, 0. It opens downward, so that means it's going to have a negative A value. And also, it would need to give you another piece of information where it also goes through the point 0, 8. So I'm just going to give that to you. It goes through 0, 8. Otherwise, you can't get a specific a value. So it would need to give you a third point. So when it gives you the x-intercepts, you are going to write out the intercept form, which is y equals a, x minus p, x minus q, where p and q are your x-intercepts. So if I'm going to go ahead and plug my x-intercepts in there, I have y equals a. I have an x-intercept at -1, so I'm going to flip the sign, and it would be x plus 1. My second x-intercept is at 4. I'm going to flip the sign, so x minus 4. Once you have that, it gives me an x and a y. So I'm going to plug that ordered pair in for my x's and my y's, and that means I can solve for my a value. So 8 equals a, 0 plus 1 is just 1, and 0 minus 4 is -4. So 8 equals -4a. So a equals what? -2. Good. Once I have my a value, I'm going to now plug that in to write it in intercept form. And intercept form would look like y equals -2, x plus 1, x minus 4. So that is intercept form. It also wants me to write it in standard form, so how would I get standard form from that? Just going to FOIL it out. So y equals -2. When I FOIL, I get x squared minus 4x plus x minus 4. Then I'm going to distribute the -2. So you should get y equals -2x squared plus 6x plus 8, and that is standard form. Okay, so for this one, I went ahead and just put it into, or I went ahead and plugged in my x-intercepts. So took the opposite sign of -2 and 5, so +2 minus 5. And then I plugged in 0 for x, -10 for y. So -10 equals a times 0 plus 2, 0 minus 5. So 2 and -5. Multiply that out. So -10 equals -10a. Divide each side by -10, so a equals 1. So to get intercept form, I'm just plugging in a equals 1. So there's like a 1 here, but you don't have to write that. Then to get standard form, you just FOIL that out, and you get x squared minus 3x minus 10. So number 5, it's giving you a graph, and it wants you to write it in all 3 forms. You can start with any of them. My suggestion would be to probably start with either intercept or vertex. Writing it in standard form first is almost nearly impossible, unless you want to do the -b over 2a thing, which takes a while. So you can either start with intercept or vertex. If I were to start with intercept form, the first thing that I want to look at is my x-intercepts. I also have my vertex or a third point at 2, -12. So it's kind of similar to question number 4 in that it gives me my x-intercepts and then it goes through the point to -12. I think on the homework, you may be able to just look at the slope and be able to tell what your a value is, but in this particular problem, you can't really tell what your a value is necessarily. It looks kind of like it is a a positive 2, but it's hard to look at the picture and tell. So if you use the way that we did for number 4, then it's going to work every time. So y equals a x minus 0, x minus 4. And I got that from plugging in my x-intercepts. Then I can use this point right here. I can use this point to plug in for x and y. So negative 12 equals a 2 minus 0, and 2 minus 4 is negative 2. So negative 12 equals negative 4a. So a equals 3. Once I have a equals 3, I can just plug it back into the original. So intercept form would be y equals 3, x minus 0, so you can just write it as x, x minus 4. So you don't have to actually write out the x minus 0. Vertex form, you're just going to use your 2, negative 12, my h and my k, and you keep this same a value. So it would be 3. My h is what of my vertex? 2. So x minus 2 squared plus k, or minus 12.
On the test, would you give us like h and k?
You would have to, well, I would give you the vertex, but you would have to know that it's h and k. And then for standard, I'm just going to multiply either the vertex or the intercept form out. To me, the intercept form looks easier to multiply out, so I'm just going to use that. So you have 3x, x minus 4, which gets you 3x squared minus 12x. Why do you think that there's no last number in the standard form? Because my y-intercept is a 0. Perfect. Another way that you could have done this, I just want to show you both ways. Another way that you could have done this to originally solve for your a is if you wanted to use the vertex form, which would be y equals a x minus 2 squared minus 12. You could choose either 4, 0 or 0, 0. Well, okay, so a second way that you could have done it is if you did the y equals a x minus 2 squared plus k, or minus 12. You could have chosen either one of these points as a second point, like as an xy. So like, let's say that I chose 0, 0 as xy. Then I would get 0 equals a negative 2 squared minus 12. 0 equals 4a minus 12. 12 equals 4a, a equals 3. So if you wanted to do it, you could either do it from intercept form and then plug in xy, or do it from vertex form and choose an xy value. So either the way we did 1 and 2 or the way we did 3 and 4, either way would work.